Respect. It's the foundation of any relationship worth having. When someone you love repeatedly ridicules your passion, your life's work, it's not just a red flag. It's a 5-alarm fire. Looking back, the signs were there all along. I just chose to ignore them, making excuses like a man desperately trying to bail water from a sinking ship. My fiancée made fun of my career at her office party. I broke off the engagement right in front of everyone. The ring I pulled from her finger was nothing compared to the dignity I reclaimed that night. But that's getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning. My name is Thomas Walker. I'm 48 years old, and I've spent the last 20 years building my landscape architecture business from the ground up. What started as a kid who loved playing in the dirt grew into a passion for transforming ordinary spaces into breathtaking outdoor sanctuaries. I'm not just some guy who plants flowers. I create living art that changes with the seasons, designs that harmonize with nature while serving the people who inhabit them. Rebecca and I met 5 years ago at a charity auction. She was 41 then, confident and sharp in her tailored suit, bidding on a weekend getaway to Napa Valley. I was there because I had donated a landscape design package. When we were introduced, her eyes lit up with genuine interest as I described the gardens I'd created for clients across the country. "You must see the world differently," she said, running her finger along the rim of her wine glass. "Most people just walk by trees and flowers without thinking about them. You see possibilities." That's what hooked me, her apparent appreciation for my vision. Rebecca was a senior partner at Harrington and Powell, one of the top corporate law firms in Boston. She represented billion-dollar clients in complex litigation cases. Her world was boardrooms and legal briefs. Mine was soil composition and native plant species. Somehow we clicked. The first 2 years were wonderful. She'd bring me to firm events and introduce me proudly. "This is Thomas, the landscape architect I've been telling you about. He just finished designing the new botanical center downtown." She'd show pictures of my projects on her phone, beaming like she'd discovered me. For my part, I supported her through a grueling class action lawsuit that had her working 18-hour days. I'd bring dinner to her office, listen to her rehearse arguments, and give her space when she needed to focus. We were a team, respecting each other's crafts, even though they couldn't have been more different. When I proposed on a cliff overlooking the Atlantic, where I'd secretly created a small garden of her favorite flowers, she cried and said yes without hesitation. We talked about combining our lives, her downtown condo and my farmhouse on the outskirts of the city. We discussed children, it wasn't too late, travel plans, and growing old together. Everything seemed perfect, but as Rebecca climbed further up the corporate ladder, something began to shift. It started with small comments, barely noticeable at first. "Must be nice to work outside instead of being trapped in depositions all day," she'd say, with just a hint of dismissiveness. Or, "Did you actually make any money this month?" Or, "Was it all just playing in the dirt?" I brushed these remarks off as stress-induced teasing, a harmless way for her to blow off steam. After all, she was under tremendous pressure after being named managing partner of the firm's environmental law division. The irony wasn't lost on me. She defended corporate clients against environmental regulations while engaged to a man who had dedicated his life to working with nature. What I didn't realize then was that these small comments were just the first sprouts of a problem that would eventually grow to strangle our relationship at its roots. Spring had just arrived when Rebecca made partner at her firm. I threw her a surprise party, transforming our backyard into an enchanted garden with string lights and cherry blossoms. She seemed genuinely moved. "This is incredible, Thomas," she whispered. "No one has ever done anything like this for me." The shift happened gradually. Rebecca started bringing home stories about her firm's newest clients, major developers planning luxury high-rises that often involve destroying green spaces. "Johnson Development is transforming that old park downtown," she mentioned over dinner. "Mixed-use complex. 40 stories. That's the park with those 100-year-old oaks," I replied, concerned. "Please tell me they're preserving some of the tree canopy." Rebecca rolled her eyes. "They're putting in some decorative pots. It's prime real estate, Thomas, not a nature preserve. Those decorative pots aren't the same as established trees that clean the air," I countered. "God, you sound like the environmental nuts we deal with," she sighed. "It's just progress." That was our first real clash of values. Rebecca had always seemed respectful of my perspective. Now she was dismissing concerns fundamental to my work. The next blow came when Rebecca was assigned to represent a company fighting cleanup requirements for a chemical spill that had devastated a wetland ecosystem. "This is big," she said excitedly. "If we win, I'm looking at a major bonus in my own corner office." I looked through the documents, reports detailing the damage, photographs of dead wildlife. This company dumped carcinogens into a watershed, and they're fighting having to fix it. "They're exercising their legal right to challenge excessive requirements," Rebecca corrected coldly. "My job isn't to judge them." "And what about our interests?" I asked. "We were talking about starting a family. Would you want our kid drinking water downstream from this place?" "Don't be dramatic," she scoffed. "This is my career. I can't pick clients based on whether they plant enough trees to make you happy." That night, I slept in the guest room. I couldn't reconcile the woman I've fallen in love with and this person who seemed increasingly contemptuous of my principles. In the following weeks, Rebecca worked late most nights. When we did talk, she showed less and less interest in my projects. When I shared news about designing a healing garden for the children's hospital, she barely looked up. "Is there much money in that? Seems like a lot of work for a nonprofit budget." "It's not about the money," I replied, hurt. "It's about creating a space where sick kids can find peace." "Right," she laughed dismissively. "I forget sometimes that you're more concerned with making pretty flowers grow than building something substantial." Her words hit like a physical blow. For the first time, I wondered if Rebecca had ever truly valued what I did. A month before the fateful office party, Rebecca and I attended her law school reunion. These were the people she'd climbed the professional ladder with, and I could tell she was itching to show off her success. The event was at some ritzy downtown hotel with marble floors that probably cost more than my truck. I wore my best suit. Not exactly designer, but decent enough. Rebecca had been on edge all day, checking her appearance constantly and reminding me to please try to mingle. "Just don't spend all night talking about soil pH levels," she said as we walked in, straightening my tie with a tight smile. I bit my tongue, as if I couldn't handle myself at social functions. Hell, half my business came from networking at events just like this. The evening started out fine. I chatted with a couple who wanted advice on their beachfront property, and Rebecca seemed pleased that I was making myself useful. But then I overheard her talking to a former classmate, now a judge. "So your fiancé creates gardens?" the woman asked, glancing my way. Rebecca laughed that new laugh of hers, the one that made my skin crawl. "He calls it landscape architecture. Sounds fancier than digging holes and planting petunias." The judge chuckled. "Well, we can't all change the world through the legal system." "Exactly," Rebecca nodded. "It keeps him busy and out of trouble." I felt like I'd been sucker punched. Rebecca knew damn well that what I did required years of education, creative vision, and technical expertise. She'd seen the awards on my office wall. Later, in the cab home, I called her out. "So I just dig holes and plant petunias, huh?" She had the decency to look embarrassed. "You weren't supposed to hear that. I was just playing to my audience." By throwing me under the bus. I asked, "That judge thinks I'm some glorified gardener now." "Don't be so sensitive," Rebecca huffed. "It was just small talk. Small talk that made your fiancé look small." I shot back. "For crying out loud, Thomas. Not everything revolves around your precious plants. Some of us have to deal with real-world problems." There was again this new narrative that what I did wasn't real work, that preserving natural environments, creating sustainable spaces, designing areas where people could reconnect with nature was somehow trivial compared to her corporate legal battles. "You used to respect what I do," I said quietly. "I respect that it makes you happy," she replied, not meeting my eyes. "But let's be real, it's not exactly changing the world." That night, lying awake while she slept soundly beside me, I realized we were growing in completely different directions. Rebecca was becoming someone who valued status and prestige above all else, while I remained committed to creating beauty and sustainability in a world that desperately needed both. What killed me wasn't that she had different values. It was that she seemed to think mine weren't worth a damn anymore. The woman who once admired my vision now saw it as something childish, something to be tolerated rather than celebrated. And for the first time, I found myself wondering if I really wanted to spend my life with someone who could so easily dismiss everything I stood for. It wasn't just about hurt feelings. It was about basic respect. And once that's gone, what's left worth saving? The week before everything fell apart, I landed the biggest project of my career, redesigning the city's botanical gardens. It was the kind of high-profile gig landscape architects dream about. My proposal centered on sustainable water management and creating interactive spaces that would reconnect urban dwellers with nature. When I got the call, I was over the moon. This was validation on a massive scale. I rushed home early, picked up a bottle of champagne, and waited for Rebecca to return from work. She walked in around 8, looking exhausted but triumphant. "The Sullivan merger is finally done," she announced, kicking off her heels. 3 months of work wrapped up today. "That's great," I said, genuinely happy for her. "I've got news too. Crack open that champagne, and I'll tell you all about it." Her eyebrows raised slightly. "You're celebrating something?" I popped the cork. "I got the Botanical Gardens contract. Beat out firms twice our size." "Oh," she said, accepting the glass I handed her. "That's nice." Nice. This was career-defining. "It's a little more than nice," I laughed. "It's a 7-figure contract that'll put my firm on the map nationally." Rebecca took a sip. 7 figures over how many years, though? After expenses and labor, what does that actually mean for your bottom line? The champagne suddenly tasted flat. "It means I'll be creating a landmark destination that could transform how people interact with public green spaces," I said, trying to keep my cool. "It's not just about the money." "Of course not," she replied with that condescending smile. "It never is with you." "What's that supposed to mean?" She sighed. "Nothing. I'm tired, Thomas. The Sullivan deal means a partner track for me. Real security, real prestige. I just wish your gardening hobby could contribute something similar." I nearly choked. "Hobby? I've spent 20 years building my business from nothing. I employ 15 people. My designs have won national awards." "And that's wonderful," she said, patting my arm like I was a child showing off a crayon drawing. "I just worry about our future together. My colleagues' spouses are surgeons, executives, people who contribute meaningfully to their household income." "I contribute meaningfully," I shot back, anger rising. "Maybe not in ways your rich friends understand, but my work matters." "I never said it didn't matter," Rebecca replied, her voice cooling. "Just that it matters in a different way than real professional careers." There it was. The truth finally laid bare. In her eyes, I wasn't a professional. My education, expertise, creativity, none of that qualified as real work to her. "You know what?" I said, putting down my glass. "Keep the champagne. I'm going for a drive." I spent hours cruising back roads, the radio off, just thinking. By the time I returned home, Rebecca was asleep, and I was facing a hard truth. The woman I planned to marry fundamentally disrespected what I did. And no matter how big my projects got, how much recognition I received, that wasn't likely to change. Little did I know, things were about to get much worse. The night of Rebecca's firm's annual gala arrived. It was their biggest social event. Partners, associates, major clients, all dressed to the nines at the waterfront Hilton. Rebecca had been talking about it for weeks, reminding me to get my suit dry cleaned and to please try to impress the senior partners. The venue was all glass and steel, overlooking the harbor, exactly the kind of sleek, modern space Rebecca loved. I felt like a fish out of water in my navy suit while everyone else wore tuxedos or designer gowns. Rebecca, stunning in a black dress that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage, kept a firm grip on my arm as she guided me through the crowd. "There's Judge Holloway," she whispered, steering me toward an elderly man in a perfect tuxedo. "He's on the board of the Historical Preservation Committee, the ones who need to approve that new downtown project." We chatted politely with the judge and his wife, sticking to safe topics like the weather and local sports. Then the judge asked what I did for a living. "I own Walker Landscape Architecture," I said. "We specialize in sustainable designs that work with natural ecosystems rather than against them." "Oh, how interesting," the judge's wife exclaimed. "We've been thinking about redoing our garden." "Perhaps. Thomas makes very nice gardens," Rebecca cut in with a laugh. "But for something with historical significance, you'd probably want a real architect. Thomas just plays with plants and dirt all day. It's more of a creative outlet than actual architecture." The couple laughed awkwardly, clearly sensing the tension. "Actually," I said, "landscape architecture requires a master's degree and state licensure. It's not gardening. It's environmental design that addresses everything from stormwater management to ecosystem preservation." Rebecca squeezed my arm painfully. He takes it all very seriously, she said with that condescending smile. Meanwhile, I'm over here, just trying to build skyscrapers and reshape the city skyline, which would be impossible without proper site planning and environmental impact studies, I noted, typically conducted by landscape architects. The judge nodded, seeming genuinely interested, but Rebecca was already pulling me away with a hurried excuse about mingling. What the hell was that? She hissed once we were out of earshot. You made me look bad. I made you look bad, I replied, keeping my voice low. You just told a potential client that what I do is essentially playing in a sandbox. Oh, grow up, she snapped. These people don't care about your ecological crusade. They care about power and influence, things you know nothing about. Something in me snapped. For years I'd worked alongside developers, engineers, and architects who respected my expertise. Only Rebecca, the woman who was supposed to be my biggest supporter, treated me like my career was a joke. My fiancée made fun of my career at her office party, I said, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. I think I'll break off the engagement right in front of everyone. I pulled the ring box from my pocket and placed it in her palm. We're done, I said simply, and walked out. Behind me, I heard gasps and Rebecca calling my name, but I didn't look back. Some bridges, once burned, aren't worth rebuilding. I spent that night at a hotel downtown, phone switched off, staring at the ceiling until dawn broke over the harbor. By morning, I had 17 voicemails and 32 text messages. Most were from Rebecca, cycling through anger, confusion, and finally desperate pleas to talk. The others were from mutual friends, her family, even a couple of her colleagues expressing shock at what happened. Word travels fast when you publicly end an engagement at a high-profile event. I ignored them all and drove to my office. Thankfully, it was Saturday, so I had the place to myself. Just me and the architectural models, plant samples, and design boards that represented my life's work. The work Rebecca had belittled so casually. Around noon, my business partner, Dave, showed up. He leaned against my drafting table, coffee mug in hand, saying nothing for a long moment. So, he finally broke the silence. You pulled the pin on that grenade. You heard. Rebecca called. Twice. He sipped his coffee. Sounded pretty torn up. She should have thought about that before publicly humiliating me. I replied, not looking up from my sketches. Dave nodded slowly. For what it's worth, I've never liked the way she talked about what we do. Like we're just playing with pretty flowers instead of reshaping environments. I glanced up, surprised. You noticed that too? Hard to miss, buddy. Last Christmas party, she cornered my wife explaining how I'd probably grow up and get a real job eventually. Lisa nearly dumped her drink on her. I rubbed my eyes, suddenly exhausted. Why didn't you tell me? Not my place, Dave shrugged. Besides, I figured you had your reasons for putting up with it. But I didn't, not really. I've been making excuses for Rebecca's behavior, hoping it was just a phase, that eventually she'd come back to being the woman who once appreciated my vision. My phone buzzed again. Rebecca, for the 18th time. You gonna answer that? Dave asked. Not yet. Maybe not ever. He nodded, understanding. Your name's on the blueprints for half this city's green spaces, Thomas. You've won national awards. You've created places that will outlive both of us. Don't let anyone, especially someone who claims to love you, make you feel small for that. His words hit home. I'd spent years trying to earn respect from the one person who should have given it freely. What happens now? Dave asked. Now I focus on the Botanical Gardens project, I replied, straightening my drawings. It's the biggest opportunity of my career, and I'm not going to let this derail it. And Rebecca? I thought about it for a moment. She made her choice. She chose status and prestige over respect and understanding. I'm choosing my self-respect over a relationship that made me doubt my worth. Dave clapped me on the shoulder. That's the Thomas Walker I know. Now let's grab some real coffee and talk about those water features for the east entrance. For the first time since leaving the gala, I felt like I could breathe again. Sometimes you have to prune away the dead growth before new life can take root. 3 weeks after ending my engagement, I threw myself into the Botanical Gardens project. The design team and I worked 16-hour days, fueled by coffee and purpose. Rebecca's calls had finally stopped, replaced by a formal email requesting the return of certain gifts, like the expensive watch I'd never liked anyway. Our mutual friends awkwardly divided themselves. Some called to express support. Others quietly disappeared from my life. It stung, but not as much as I'd expected. What surprised me most was the overwhelming sense of relief. No more defending my profession. No more subtle put-downs. No more feeling like I wasn't measuring up to some arbitrary standard of success. One Tuesday evening, as I was finalizing the water conservation feature for the gardens, Elaine from City Planning stopped by with permit questions. "You seem different," she observed as we reviewed the documents. "More. I don't know, present." I'd known Elaine professionally for years. She'd always respected my work, consulting me on green space requirements for major developments. "I broke off my engagement," I told her. "That explains it," she nodded. "You don't look like you're apologizing for existing anymore." Her comment struck me. Had I really been that way with Rebecca? Constantly apologizing for who I was and what I did. "Join me for dinner?" Elaine asked, surprising me. "Strictly professional, of course. I want to pick your brain about the downtown Riverwalk renovation." For the first time in months, I felt a genuine smile spread across my face. "I'd like that." Over Thai food, we talked passionately about urban green spaces, stormwater management, and the healing power of nature in concrete landscapes. Not once did she make me feel like my expertise was trivial or that my career was less important than hers. It wasn't a date. Not exactly, but as we parted ways, I realized something crucial. I deserved to be with someone who valued me for exactly who I was, not who they wanted me to be. The seeds of something new were beginning to sprout. 2 months after the breakup, the Botanical Gardens project was in full swing. My team had transformed the initial plans into a comprehensive design that the city council unanimously approved. Local media picked up the story, and suddenly Walker landscape architecture was the talk of the town. I was inspecting the site one morning when Dave called with news that made my stomach drop. "Rebecca's firm is representing the developer trying to buy the parcel next to the gardens," he said. "They want to put up luxury condos that would cast shadows over the entire eastern section." "You've got to be kidding me," I groaned. "Wish I was. There's a public hearing next week. We need to be there." I spent days preparing my argument about the ecological impact the development would have on our carefully designed garden ecosystems. The hearing room was packed when I arrived. Environmental activists, concerned citizens, and of course, Rebecca and her legal team representing Wellington Properties. Our eyes met across the room. She looked thinner, her tailored suit hanging slightly loose. For a split second, something like regret flickered across her face before her professional mask slipped back into place. When it was my turn to speak, I approached the podium with confidence. This wasn't about personal history. It was about protecting a vital project. The proposed development would fundamentally undermine the sustainability features of the botanical gardens, I explained, displaying shadow studies and impact assessments. The gardens were designed as a living laboratory for climate resilience and biodiversity. This development threatens that mission. I laid out alternatives, how the building could be redesigned to minimize impact, how green roofs and walls could mitigate some damage. I was professional, focused, and passionate. Everything Rebecca once claimed to admire about me. After the hearing, as I gathered my materials, Rebecca approached. "Your presentation was impressive," she said stiffly. "I'm just doing my job," I replied. "The one you thought was so trivial." She winced. "I deserve that. But for what it's worth, I was wrong. About a lot of things. Little late for that realization, isn't it?" Rebecca glanced around to make sure no one was within earshot. "I've been seeing a therapist, trying to understand why I treated your work, the way I did. And I was insecure," she admitted, "terrified of not being taken seriously. I thought I needed a partner with traditional prestige to validate me. It was stupid and cruel, and I'm sorry." Her apology seemed genuine, but it didn't undo the damage. "I hope you find what you're looking for, Rebecca," I said, gathering my papers. "But it was never going to be me, not if you couldn't respect what I do." As I turned to leave, Elaine from City Planning appeared at my side. "That was fantastic," she said, eyes bright with admiration. "Want to grab coffee and discuss next steps?" Rebecca's face fell as she watched us walk away. Some lessons come too late to save what's already been lost. 6 months after walking out of Rebecca's office party, I stood at the edge of the newly completed central plaza of the Botanical Gardens. The grand opening was just 2 weeks away, and workers were putting final touches on the installation, placing benches, adjusting lighting, and fine-tuning the intricate water features that would recycle rainwater throughout the entire garden system. "It's even more beautiful than the renderings," Elaine said, slipping her hand into mine as we surveyed the space. "You've created something spectacular here, Thomas." What had started as professional coffee meetings had evolved naturally into something more. Elaine understood my work instinctively. The technical challenges, the creative vision, the deeper purpose. Our relationship had none of the friction that had defined my time with Rebecca. Instead, there was mutual respect, shared values, and genuine enjoyment of each other's company. "The vertical gardens are my favorite," she continued, pointing to the living walls that cascaded down the visitor center. "The way you integrated native species at different heights. It's like a visual symphony. I couldn't have pulled it off without your help navigating the permit maze," I replied, squeezing her hand. "This project had more red tape than most federal buildings." "That's what makes us a good team," she smiled. "You create the vision, I help make it bureaucratically possible." As we walked the winding paths, I noticed a familiar figure standing by the eastern entrance. Dave, talking animatedly with a reporter from the local paper. "Walker Landscape Architecture is booked solid for the next 2 years," I overheard him saying. "Since the Botanical Gardens Commission, we've had to bring on 3 new designers just to handle the workload." It wasn't an exaggeration. The success of this project had catapulted the firm into a new league. We were suddenly fielding calls from across the country, university campuses, municipal governments, even private estates, seeking sustainable, ecologically sound designs. "You're officially a big deal," Elaine teased as we approached. "Should I be asking for your autograph?" The reporter turned, recognizing me, and immediately launched into questions about the inspiration behind the gardens, the sustainable technologies we'd incorporated, the expected environmental impact. I answered enthusiastically, no longer feeling the need to downplay my expertise or justify my passion. As the interview wrapped up, my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Just saw the article about you in National Design. So proud of you, son." I showed it to Elaine, who beamed. "Your mom has excellent taste." That profile was incredible. They called you a visionary reshaping how urban spaces connect with natural systems. "Not bad for a guy who just plays with plants and dirt," I joked. "Who said that?" Dave scoffed. "Sounds like someone who doesn't understand the first thing about landscape architecture." "Ancient history," I replied, looking around at what we'd built. A living, breathing ecosystem that would educate and inspire generations. What matters is what's growing now. And what was growing in every aspect of my life was thriving beyond anything I could have imagined. 1 year to the day after I walked out of Rebecca's office party, I stood at the entrance of the Botanical Gardens for its first anniversary celebration. The project had exceeded everyone's expectations. Visitor numbers were double projections. Educational programs were booked months in advance, and urban planners from across the country were coming to study our sustainable water systems. Mayor Davis cut the ceremonial ribbon for the new Children's Discovery Garden, my latest addition to the space. As cameras flashed, I spotted Rebecca at the back of the crowd. Our eyes met briefly before she nodded once and slipped away. I felt no bitterness anymore, just a sense of closure. She taught me an invaluable lesson about self-worth and respecting my own path. Sometimes the most important landscapes we design are the boundaries of our own lives. "Penny for your thoughts," Elaine said, appearing at my side in her city planning department blazer. "Just reflecting on how much can change in a year," I replied, taking her hand. Later that evening, as Elaine and I strolled through the illuminated gardens, I stopped by the Japanese maple grove and dropped to one knee. "You've seen me at my lowest and my highest," I said, opening a small box containing a ring I designed myself, a band of reclaimed gold with small emeralds arranged like leaves. "You've respected my work, challenged my thinking, and made me happier than I thought possible. Will you marry me?" Her yes echoed through the garden, as natural and right as the flowing water features we designed together. At the celebration dinner afterward, Dave raised his glass. "To Thomas and Elaine, proof that when you remove the weeds, the right things can finally grow." My mother squeezed my arm. "I'm so proud of the man you've become. You stood up for yourself when it mattered most." Looking around at the faces of those who truly valued me, I realized I created something far more important than award-winning landscapes. I'd built a life where I was respected for exactly who I was. Nothing more, nothing less.